All right, so I'm going to start my presentation with thought experiment, which I call the case of natural hell. So suppose that we have natural hell, which is an untouched natural environment in which there is this huge number of sentient beings who are just suffering extremely and then dying very soon. So their lives just contain extreme suffering for a short time. And then enter paradise from intervention. Then we alter this environment through some means, and as a result of our intervention, now these sentient beings live in wonderful conditions, right? Well, I mean, there are people who oppose intervention, even in this particular case, and who say that, well, we should leave nature be as it is, and we shouldn't intervene. But most of us would assume that it would be good to move from natural hell to paradise from intervention, because we think that the lives of those individuals matter, and how those lives those lives are is basically what matters. So we have this assumption that natural hell should be changed. Now, of course, this doesn't mean that this doesn't entail immediately that we should intervene in actual nature, and there are several positions against concluding so. And the first one, which is quite easy to guess, is what I call the idyllic view of nature, which simply claims that nature isn't natural hell. And actually, it even claims that nature is a paradise for animals. As I said, this was the view that some years ago I used to have. But there are other ways also of opposing intervention. For instance, what I call the speciesist view. We may accept that animals live lives that aren't good at all in nature, but still we can say, well, who cares about non-human animals? I mean, well, they aren't humans, so we shouldn't really care a lot for their interests, so why should we take the pain of intervening and helping them, particularly when that can be against our own interests? Then the third position would be what I call the environmentalist view, which basically means that if there is something wrong with interfering in nature. And as I said before, those who hold this view may even reject intervention in a case such as natural hell, the one that I presented at first. They may have a different conception of what is valuable, or they may have deontological constraints that make it unacceptable for them to interfere with nature in any way. And then the fourth and last position would be what I call the pessimistic view, which may accept that nature is a bad place to animals, and that we should do something about it. But at the end, it claims that all efforts will fail, because natural processes are so complex, and it's impossible to really know how to work there, and our actions may have unforeseen consequences. So yeah, intervention can succeed. So I'm gonna tackle these different objections, and I'm gonna see if they succeed. Well, as you know already, I'm gonna claim that they don't succeed, but still we have to look why this is so. Right. So let's start with the first one. Nature is paradise. Now, I'm going to claim that this view is wrong, but before that, we need to see what are the different versions that this argument can have. And there are basically two versions that I want to distinguish. The first one is the strong version, which claims that even if the lives of animals just contain suffering and premature death, according to some views, their lives are still good. So, for instance, some Aristotelian positions may claim this by saying, well, what is good for us is just living the kind of life that is meant for us to live, right? So if an animal is meant to just, be born, suffer, and die, well, it's simply good for that animal to do so.
Sorry.
I think that many of us reject this view, but before I actually say that, we can also see the weak version. So the weak version accepts that living a life that is very short and just contains suffering can be bad, or is actually bad for us. But it claims that on the overall, if we balance the suffering that there is in nature against the happiness that there is in nature, there is more happiness than suffering. Right. So this view, for instance, can't be compatible, I think, with, for instance, an egalitarian or a maximum view that were extended to non-human animals. Because, well, you know, even if it is the case that these animals are enjoying this happy situation, it's unfair that these others are suffering for the first thing to occur. Still, I'm going to claim that even this view that even if egalitarians may reject it, utilitarians may still accept it. But I'm going to claim that even utilitarians should reject this. So, as I said before, I think that the strong version must be rejected if we believe that well-being is valuable. I mean, even if we believe that well-being isn't the only thing that is valuable, in as much as we believe that, you know, there is some value there, I think we'll have to reject the strong version. Because, you know, even if life in nature can be good in some respect to animals, if it's so bad with regards to their well-being, we just can't accept that on the overall their lives are good. And then I'm going to claim that the weak version is wrong. So, in order to see why this weak version is wrong, we need to take a look at what population dynamics can teach us. Well, and I don't know if any of you is familiar with this formula. Is as I said there, it's Verhulst's equation of population growth or population dynamics, and it's basically about how populations of animals vary their numbers through time. So in this equation, t is a certain period of time, and it's the initial population size when t starts. Then r is the reproductive rate, that is the number of the offspring that these animals have, and k is the carrying capacity of the environment for this population. That is, k is what determines the number of individuals that survive, right? So, what happens is that for a certain time t, a population whose initial number was n will vary depending on two things. First, how many offspring are born, and second, the survival rate of the offspring. Right. According to this, there are two main reproductive strategies in nature, which depend on these two key factors. The first one is maximizing k, and this is called k selection. And what does it mean to maximize k? It means maximizing the probabilities that animals that come to existence have of surviving. So, for instance, what animals are following this reproductive strategy? Well, we humans are, and primates. We just have one child at a time. Well, sometimes we may have like twins and all that, but we usually just have one child at a time. Other animals, such as big herbivores, also follow this strategy. And what this entails is that very, very few animals come to existence, but they are very, very well taken care of. I mean, their parents spend a great deal of energy in trying to save their lives and in trying to getting them to maturity. But then there is this other reproductive strategy, which is R selection. And R selection simply consists on, not caring too much about your children, about your offspring, but having huge progenies, right? So, for instance, this is an example of it. Here we have an anemone fish offspring. So there are a huge number of these individuals that have come to existence. So what happens? What happens to these animals? And why am I claiming that this is the reason why suffering in nature is so high that the idyllic view is wrong? Well, what happens is simply this, that on average, if a population is stable, just one individual per parent will survive. I mean, the populations of animals aren't stable, they are varying all the time. But still, I mean, populations are stable because some are being increased while others are being reduced. So on average, it makes sense to consider that they are stable. We consider the whole bunch of animal population. So what happens is that R selection works as follows. We have two individuals at time 0, the parents. Then we have, say, 10,000 individuals at time E. You know who? their children, so to speak, their progeny.